I want to have a child, even if it's a hedgehog.
Welcome to Fairytale Fritz. If you enjoy fairy tales and bedtime stories, please hit the subscribe button in the bottom right corner and you will receive updates and more tales. Today's story is another Grimm's fairy tale, number 22, HANS, My Hedgehog. Once upon a time there lived a rich farmer, but no matter how rich he was, something was missing in his life, for he and his wife were unable to have children. When the farmer went into town with the other farmers, they often made fun of him and asked why he was childless. One day he finally got angry, and he went home and said,
I want to have a child, even if it's a hedgehog.
Then his wife gave birth to a child whose upper half was hedgehog and the bottom half was human. When she saw this child, she was horrified and said,
Look, you have cursed us.
Well, there's nothing we can do about it now,
said her husband.
The boy must be baptized, but we'll never find a godfather for him.
There's only one name I can think of for him,
said the wife,
and that is HANS, My Hedgehog.
After Hans was baptized, the pastor said,
He won't be able to sleep in a regular bed because all of his little sharp spines.
So they gathered together some straw, spread it on the floor behind the stove, and that's where they put Hans the little hedgehog. His mother was unable to nurse him because he would have stung her with his little spines. And so he lay behind the stove for 8 years. And eventually his father got tired of him and wished that he might die. But he didn't die. He just kept lying there. One day there was a fair in town, and the dad decided to go out, and he asked his wife if she wanted anything.
Some meat and a few buns,
she said.
That's all we need for the house.
And then he asked the maid, and she wanted a pair of slippers and hand-sewn stockings. Finally, he went and asked his son,
Hans, my hedgehog, what would you like to have?
Father, he said, just bring me some bagpipes. When the father returned home, he gave his wife the meat and the buns that he had bought. Then he handed the maid the slippers and the hand-sewn stockings. And finally, he went behind the stove and gave Hans his bagpipes. Upon receiving the bagpipes, he said, Father, could you please also go to the blacksmith and have him shoe our old rooster? If you do that, I promise I'll ride away and never return. The father liked the idea of getting rid of Hans and the old rooster as well. So when the rooster was ready, Hans the little hedgehog mounted it and rode away, taking some donkeys and pigs with him, which he wanted to tend out in the forest. Once he reached the forest, he had the rooster fly him up into a tall tree, where he sat and tended the donkeys and pigs. Indeed, he sat there for many years, until the herd was very large, and he never sent word to his father about his whereabouts. As he sat in the tree, he played his bagpipes and made some beautiful music. One day, a king who had lost his way in the forest came riding by. When he heard the music, he was so astonished that he sent his servant to look around and see where it was coming from. The servant looked around, but all he could see was a small animal sitting up in a tree that seemed to be a rooster with a hedgehog sitting on top of it, playing the music. The king told the servant to ask the creature why he was sitting there and whether he knew the way back to the king's country. Hans the hedgehog climbed down from the tree and said he would show him the way if the king would promise in writing to give him the first thing he met at the castle courtyard when he returned home. The king thought, That's easy. Hans the hedgehog can't understand writing, so I can write whatever I want. The king took ink and feather and wrote something down, and after he had done this, Hans the hedgehog showed him the way, and the king arrived home safely. When his daughter saw him coming from afar, she was so overcome with joy that she ran out to meet him and kissed him. Then he thought of Hans the Hedgehog and explained to her what had happened. He had been forced to make a promise in writing to a strange creature who had demanded to have the first thing the king met upon returning home. This creature had been sitting on a rooster as though it were a horse and had been playing beautiful music. The king told his daughter that he had, however, written down that Hans the Hedgehog was not to get what he demanded. The hedgehog can't read anyways. The princess was happy to hear that she wouldn't be given away, and Hans my Hedgehog continued tending his donkeys and pigs. He was always cheerful, sitting there perched in his tree, playing his bagpipes. Now it happened that another king came driving by with his servants and guards. He too had lost his way, and the forest was so large that he didn't know how to get back home. He too heard the beautiful music from afar, and he told a guard to go and see what it was. So the guard went to the tree and saw the rooster sitting there with Hans the Hedgehog on its back, and the guard asked him what he was doing up there. "I'm tending my donkeys and pigs, but what can I do for you?" The guard asked him whether he could show them the way out of the forest, since they were lost and couldn't make it back to their kingdom. Hans the Hedgehog climbed down from the tree with his rooster and told the old king that he would show him the way if the king would give him the first thing that met him when he returned home to his royal castle. The king agreed and put it in writing that Hans the Hedgehog was to have what he demanded. Once it was done, Hans the Hedgehog rode ahead of him on the rooster and showed him the way. The king reached his kingdom safely, and as he entered the castle courtyard, there was great rejoicing. His only daughter, who was very beautiful, ran toward him and embraced him. She was so happy to see her old father again and asked him what in the world had kept him so long. He told her he had lost his way and would have never come back had it not been for this strange creature, half human, half hedgehog, who helped him find his way out of the forest. The creature had been sitting astride a rooster up in a tall tree and had been playing beautiful music. In return for his help, the king had promised to give him the first thing that met him at the castle courtyard. Now he was heartbroken that it happened to be his only daughter. However, out of love for her old father, the princess promised him that she would go with Hans the Hedgehog whenever he came. In the meantime, Hans the Hedgehog kept tending his pigs, and the pigs had more pigs, and eventually there were so many that the entire forest was full of them. Then Hans the Hedgehog sent word to his father to clear out all the pigsties in the village, for he was coming with such a huge herd of pigs that anyone who wanted to slaughter one could have his pick. Once hearing this, his father was distressed, for he had believed that Hans the Hedgehog had long been dead. Nevertheless, Hans the Hedgehog mounted his rooster, drove his pigs ahead of him into the village, and ordered the slaughtering to begin. There was such chopping and butchering that the noise could be heard for miles around. Afterward, Hans the Hedgehog said, "Father, have the blacksmith shoe my rooster one more time. Then I'll ride away and never return as long as I live." So his father had the rooster shod and was glad that Hans the Hedgehog didn't want to return again. When Hans the Hedgehog departed, he set out for the country of the first king whom he had helped. But that king had given his men orders to stop anyone who was riding on a rooster and playing bagpipes from entering the castle. If necessary, they were to use their cannons, spears, or swords to stop him. So when Hans the Hedgehog came riding in, they attacked him with their bayonets. But he put spurs to his rooster, and the bird rose in the air, flew over the gate, and landed on the ledge of the king's window. He called to the king to keep his promise and gave him the princess. Otherwise, he would take his life and his daughter's as well. Then the king implored his daughter with the best words he could use to go with Hans the Hedgehog to save their lives. So she dressed herself all in white, and her father gave her a coach with 6 horses, splendid servants, money, and property. She got into the coach and was followed by Hans the Hedgehog with his bagpipes and his rooster by his side. They then said goodbye and drove away, and the king thought that was the last he would ever see of his daughter. But things happened much differently from how he thought they would. When they had gone a little way from the city, Hans the Hedgehog took off the princess's beautiful clothes and stung her with his sharp little spines until she was all covered with blood. "This is what you get for being so deceitful," he said. "Go away. I don't want you." Then he chased her home, and she lived in disgrace for the rest of her life. Meanwhile, Hans the Hedgehog took his bagpipes, got on his rooster, and continued his journey toward the second kingdom, which belonged to the other king whom he had led out of the forest. But this king had ordered his men to present arms, to allow Hans the Hedgehog to enter, and to greet him by shouting, "Long may he live." After that, they were to escort him into the royal palace. When the king's daughter saw him, she was frightened because he looked so strange, but she thought there was nothing she could do, for she had promised her father to go with him. Therefore, she welcomed Hans the Hedgehog and had to go with him to the royal table where she sat next to him. Then they ate and they drank. And when evening came and it was time to go to bed, she was very much afraid of his spines. But he said not to fear, because he had no intention of harming her. Then he told the king to have 4 men stand watch in front of the bedroom door and to make a big fire. For when he got inside and prepared to go to bed, he would slip out of his hedgehog skin and leave it in front of the bed. The men were then to rush in quickly, throw the skin on the fire, and stand there until it was completely burnt. When the clock struck 11, he went into the room, stripped off the hedgehog's skin, and left it on the floor in front of the bed. Right after this, the men came, picked up the skin, and threw it into the fire. When the fire had consumed it, he was set free and lay in bed just like a human being, but he was pitch black, as if he had been burned. The king sent for his doctor, who rubbed him with special ointments and balms, and gradually he turned into a handsome young man. When the princess saw that, she was very happy. The next morning they got up in a joyful mood, and they had a fine meal. Then the wedding was held, and Hans the Hedgehog was given the entire kingdom by the old king. After some years had passed, the young king took his wife and drove to visit his father, and he told the old man that he was his son. The father said he had no son, though he once had one, but he had been born with spines like a hedgehog and had gone off into the world. Then Hans the Hedgehog revealed himself to his father, and the old man rejoiced and went back with him to the kingdom. The end.